Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So Into Resin recently contacted me and asked if I would be interested in trying any of their handmade molds, and I'm super interested. Like, I've been looking at these molds for a hot minute now and I am really excited. So I have three different ones now. Two of them came in one shipment and one came a little bit later on, so I will be doing something with the last one later on in the video. But this one right here is the Crystal Lotus brooch mold, and this one here is the turtle mold, and they're so pretty. Like, I am really excited to try this. Now, I'm gonna be honest, the reason that I picked, or a big reason why I picked the Lotus mold, is because there was a comment on there saying that nobody could get a perfect casting out of this mold. And I kind of took that as a challenge. So we're going to try this a couple different ways, because we all know that using the right resin for the right job, so, UV resin as opposed to a fast curing resin, as opposed to the normal epoxy resin, as opposed to a deep pour resin, they all have their places as far as what they need. But, sometimes molds have certain things that they need too. And these molds are very intricate. Like, these flower molds have like underlays and all kinds of stuff in them, where the mold isn't just, okay, like the turtle mold, for instance, is just an opening, right? Well, these flower molds aren't like that. So they require more thought behind how you're going to pour this. You just can't pour your resin in and call it a day and expect it to cure. Like, you've actually got to work it. So what I'm doing is, for this part of the experiment, I am using Let's Resin's 4-hour demold resin. Now, it is a super thick resin, right? So we have very tiny little spots. Now, is it going to work? I don't know. We're going to find out. But what I'm doing is, I poured just a tiny bit of resin into this mold, and I am going in and I'm kind of lightly stretching the mold a little bit, like kind of opening it up so the resin can get into all of those undercuts and all the cracks and crevices and just different parts of the flower, to get it in there and get the air out. And then I'm carefully, it may look like I'm not being careful, but I am being very careful, because I don't want to ruin the crystal effect that these molds have. So I'm carefully going in with my silicone tool, and I'm just kind of pushing the resin in, getting the air bubbles to come out, just moving this mold around, right? Hitting it very lightly with a heat gun. That says on the instructions, don't use alcohol, don't touch it with your bare hands, like that, the crystal part of the mold. So I'm not going to do any of those things that they suggest you not to do. Could you? Absolutely, if you don't mind ruining your mold. But the instructions say not to, so that's what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to color the one for the turtle, and I've never used these molds before. You see me open them. This is the first go at them. So I don't know how they demold. I really don't know, especially with the flower, how, like, where all the petal parts are for the flower. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've seen a picture of it, yes, and that's the extent of my knowledge of this mold. That, and somebody saying that nobody can pour a good casting of it. Don't know how much they hold. Obviously, it's not a lot. They're not huge molds. They are very small. Now, with the turtle, I didn't quite get my ratios right between the Lotus mold and the turtle mold, so I didn't feel like mixing up more resin for this, since I had resin sitting there. So we're just going to go with the dual colors on it. It's for experimentation purposes, not for anything else at this point. Like, I'm not making anything necessarily with these pieces in this video. I'm just showing you guys how you can make these molds work for you. Now, like I said, I didn't have enough, so I'm just going to add this to it. There's no point in mixing more resin just for this little tiny bit. So we're just going to go with it. And, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Now, what I didn't show you, but in this one with that Lotus mold, is there was something else that I did once I turned off the camera, because I had thought about it after the fact. But I will show you here in the next one when we're going to try with a different resin. Okay, so we're about done now. This didn't necessarily fill up the turtle mold the whole entire way, but it's fine. It doesn't really need it. Quick blast with the heat gun just to pop those pesky bubbles that are on top. And then that's pretty much it. I'm just popping a few bubbles that have come up. I'm going to babysit this for a little while and we're going to see what happens. Okay, now it's time to demold. So this is 24 hours later. I'm going to do the turtle first because it's clearly the easier one of it. And it comes out like a dream. There is no nothing. It comes out beautifully. And let's see. Look at that. It's gorgeous. Okay, my color scheme, but again, like, it wasn't like I planned on using both of these colors for it. He's still cute. Can you see all the crystally effects of it? Not necessarily with the colors I picked, but it's fine. Again, this is working the mold, not necessarily the outcome in looks of the pieces, other than we're trying to go for, a completely solid piece with no air bubbles in it, especially in this one that I'm demolding here. Now, demolding this, especially after never having done it before, was kind of tricky, but it wasn't like horrible. I was going very slow because I don't want to rip any of those pieces inside because of the way that the kind of like the flower petals flow into it. I wasn't sure, so we're just going to go slow, take our time, and kind of just coax each one of these petals out of here and see if I was able to get a good casting of this with the thicker 4-hour demold resin. And I'm just about there. Like I'm really trying not hard not to ruin anything. Um, and when you don't know how like the pieces come out of something, especially a kind of like 3D mold like this, you don't want to rip anything. All right, so here we go. Let's see how this turned out. And it is pretty good. Now, there is one small, right where my thumb is, there's one air bubble in one petal, and that's it. However, again, first time using this mold, not knowing where everything's located at and how it goes. Now let's try this again, but this time we're going to go with Let's Resin's normal epoxy resin, the 8 to 24-hour cure time, and we're going to use some of Light Wish's Starry Night color series in the dark green and the deep purple and see what we can get with that. Now these are more translucent, and that's fine because I kind of want to get more of that crystally effect that I didn't really get using the alcohol inks that I used. And we're just going to kind of go with it. Now, this time, I did do a better job on my ratios of resin and was able to kind of fill up both of the molds the right way. So, what I'm doing is halfway through filling up the turtle mold, I'm just going to take my silicone tool and I'm just going to lightly kind of brush over all of those like crystal areas on this entire piece, like just to go over it to make sure it's covered with resin. And then we're going to fill it up the rest of the way, give it a quick blast with the heat gun, nothing crazy long, not like normal, because I don't want to ruin these molds. And it says there, don't use, I already said don't use the alcohol, don't use a lighter, don't use a torch. So we're just going to go easy on it. Okay, for the flour, same thing. Mixing up a little bit of this color in here, and then we're going to pour it. Now, because I have a better knowledge of where these flower petals are in this mold, I know where I kind of need to concentrate some more. And I do have another way of kind of getting these air bubbles to kind of come out and get the resin to flow into those areas that I figured out towards the end of the last one. So we're going to start again, pouring just a little bit and then kind of spreading the mold out. Now I'm going to start squeezing it together. Now, what this is doing is it is going to push up any air bubbles that are trapped down there, and then I'm going to pop them bubbles so that they don't get sucked back into it, right? And then it's going to fill back up those holes with resin. I take my time doing this part. You can't look at a mold and say, all I have to do is I'm going to dump my resin in and be done with it. And by the way, I'm not touching the mold with this toothpick. I'm just popping the bubbles that are coming up to the surface. But back to what I was saying, you can't just expect a mold like this that you can just pour the resin into it and it's going to find its own way in there. Like, we take time, even on a tray mold, of going around all the edges and the corners with our silicone tools to make sure, because we know air bubbles get stuck there. Well, what do you think is going to be like this? You need to take your time. And I spent a good, probably anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes working on this one. So you can get the results, but you've got to be willing to put in the work to get it. Now, I am going through adding a little bit more resin, and then I'm going to keep doing the same thing over the next several minutes until I don't see any more bubbles coming out. When I'm kind of squeezing this mold together, I'm going to squeeze it together, pop bubbles, pull it open, pop bubbles, squeeze it together again. Okay, that's what I did for a while. Now let's look at the results of this. Now we know the turtle's going to be fine. It's an easy mold, but I just really like them, so I just wanted to keep making new ones. And I love this one. He is probably my favorite. Like, the colors, oh my god, they're so pretty. Especially cuz I don't really care for the colors that I picked for the last one, but yeah, he's gorgeous. I love him. All right. Moment of truth. How did we do on this one? Am I able to get the entire thing with no air pockets? So again, taking our time, doing each petal by petal, going around, loosening it up, and then working those inside petals kind of out one at a time, just to kind of get it to just shimmy its way out. But I am being very, very careful, and still, I don't want to ruin this. Like, I don't. And I don't want to rip off, because the petals are thin. So I don't want to rip off any of these and damage the actual piece itself, not only the mold. All right, so are we ready? Here we go. And it looks really, really well. Now the same one that I had the air pocket in last time, just the tiniest, tiniest, like, it is barely noticeable, teeny tiny spot of an air bubble. But do you know what that's telling me? It's not a lost cause. So my third attempt was going to be, and I got the new mold in, so we're going to play with this one in this round. My third attempt was going to be a deep pour resin, and I think that that would work. I'm almost 100% positive that that would absolutely work, with no questions asked whatsoever. But I chose not to, since I got so close this last one and getting those bubbles out of there. I chose to do it again with the same resin that I did in the last one. This time I'm just adding a tiniest bit of Rolio for that super sparkle, and then we are going to pour, so I have more of the crystal effect in there, but we're going to do a little bit something different at the end of it, just to kind of finish them off. So for the flowers, I'm pouring a little bit of resin in, gonna kind of let it start doing its thing. We're going to fill up the turtle, work on him, get him done and out the way before we start on these flowers again. Now, back to the deep pour resin. I could have done it, but I think that I can get it right with this. But I do believe that if you are someone that is having issues, and I know that there are other, like, normal epoxy resins with the 8 to 24 hour cure time that are thicker than the Let's Resin brand, and maybe you're struggling and you're having a harder time getting that to work. If you are taking your time and you're actually working the resin into those areas and it's still not working for you, I think that a deep pour resin wouldn't be a horrible idea, because it is so thin and water-like that it should have a lot easier time flowing into it. It's not, yeah, we know it's deep pour and it's specifically for that because it takes a longer time to cure, but just like we push our resin to the limits in other ways, if you want to use this mold and you can't seem to get it to work for you, you could go that route too. It will still cure. It may take a little bit longer, but sometimes we just got to be patient. But I think this is going to work. So we're going to go for it. Now, in this newest mold that I have, it's just I think it's called the Crystal Flower, their new version of it. There are super undercuts in this mold. Different than the Lotus because of the way the petals go, but they are deep pockets inside that you need to make sure. And I took my silicone tool and I kind of went into each one to make sure that there's no bubbles in there, to make sure that I am pushing the resin all the way in there, squeezing out any air pockets that I see. Just like how I'm working with the Lotus one right now, I did work with that other one. The other one is a little bit easier to see because you can kind of see through the silicone mold on that particular one to where those undercuts are for it. And this one you can't necessarily do it, so you just kind of gotta find all of those little grooves and work that resin in. Now we're going to just kind of fill up the rest of the way, and then I'm going to work it some more. I'm going to spread that apart so that that resin goes into those holes. I'm going to smush it together and pop all the bubbles that are coming up from each one of these petals. And if I can't pop them, I'm going to pull them out and I'm putting them on my baby wipe. And I will continue to do this for several minutes. It is worth it to me to get that beautiful casting that I know I can get. I know it. I know it's possible. You just got to work it. So, gonna go in here a little bit more, kind of go around, making sure I don't see anything. And then after several minutes of me kind of pushing and making sure that no more air pockets are coming up, I'm gonna just set it off to the side and cross my fingers and hope for the best. That's really all I can do at this point. But I think it'll be okay. I think I figured out the mold enough to know that it's gonna be okay. And sometimes it's a matter about knowing your molds too. You can't expect a mold this intricate with this many pieces that comes out this beautifully. You can't expect to know every facet of it if you've never worked with it before. So you've got to kind of figure that out. You can pour it and it can be a total disaster and whatever, but that doesn't mean that the mold is faulty in any manner of speaking. It's just you're not taking your time in doing it. And that's what you've got to do. This one, again, squeezing it, getting any of those air bubbles out. Now I'm going into those undercuts and I'm just taking my silicone tool and making sure that the resin is all the way into all those corners so that I don't have any issues with bubbles whatsoever in this one. We're just gonna let it do its thing. And like I said, hope for the best. Now, when we come back, we're going to do something a little bit different with these and we're going to have some fun in a different way. So, this way, you're kind of seeing a couple different ways of coloring them and, seeing what works, what doesn't. Now, I'm not using mica in this. I I've seen some similar molds being done on YouTube that are these crystally type molds, and mica's okay, but I don't think that you get that effect that you're looking for using mica. All right, so 24 hours later, here we are, nice and cured. Now I'm going to take the Let's Resin Intense Chameleon powders, and I'm just going to kind of go over the back of these with the powders, and then we're going to throw some UV resin on it to seal it up and call it a day, demold them, see if we've done it, or if we've got to try again. So for this one, which is the Lotus mold, I chose the cherry color. Now you can see where I'm brushing it on. There's a spot there that I somehow missed getting resin in, but it's fine. It's fine. It'll be fine. So what's going to happen is when I go over with the UV resin, it's going to cover it, so it's not a big deal. Now, had I demolded it like that, maybe, but we're not, so it's fine. And with the turtle, I'm just going to go over his little head, his feet, and his tail with the green. And then for the shell, I'm going to go over it with the maple color and just kind of see what happens. Now, I'm just going to back these with clear UV resin. I'm not coloring it. So, where I could get the full effect of it more so if I, chose to go black over it, or even white, honestly, at this point, but I'm not going to do that. This isn't about this necessarily. This is about getting these molds to work right and ways that you can go about doing it. Now, I fully believe that even with the fast cure resin, even being the thickness that it is, I believe that I could get that Lotus mold to turn out right with the fast cure. I didn't really necessarily think about it at the time when I was kind of doing this video because I only have one of each of these molds. So, it's taken me 3 days just to cast them. This, what I've already done. So I didn't necessarily have a fourth day that I could do it. It's fine. It really is though. But had I thought about it, maybe I would have tried again to see, just to prove that you could do it with a fast cure resin too. Because where that hole was bigger, yes, but I had never used it before. So I really didn't know where like my focal points were with trying to get the resin in to go there, and I didn't necessarily work it long enough and babysit it long enough as I did the other two attempts. So I don't know, but I do think it's possible. I absolutely 100% do. You just have to be willing to put in the work to get it to work for you. And now we are on the last one, just kind of going over it with the UV resin. And for today, I'm using the ISTOYO UV resin. And then we're just gonna stick these babies underneath this Let's Resin dual light UV lamp. And what I'm gonna do is, since I kind of am, it's kind of a thicker layer than I probably should be doing with the UV, or with the, yeah, UV resin. That's what it's called. So I'm going to start out holding this light about 6-7 inches or so away from my pieces for about 2 minutes. And then I'm going to let them cure for the full 5. After that, just like normal, just put it down on top of it. And the reason that I'm doing that is, if you have a thicker layer of UV resin and you bring it in too close to that light with the wattage on it, then it can kind of cause weird like wrinkles and things to happen to your UV resin and make it look wonky. And I'm not trying to do that. So I'm going to start with it a little bit farther away, let it partially cure, and then bring it in for the fullness after it's gotten about 2 minutes under there. And we can avoid all of that. Okay. Cleaning up the last little bit of the turtle where he started running over. And I guess I'm going to hit it with a heat gun just in case there's bubbles in there. And now we're going to start curing it for the 2 minutes. And then I'm just going to cut it off because you don't need to see this. And then I'm going to let it go for a full 5. After that, okay, let's look at the results from this. All right, so first up is the turtle. So let's see how this did. And I'm curious to see how the chameleon powders kind of work underneath of it. I know Wendy from Two Pish Crafts did something very similar recently with these. I feel like she used the Tiny Turner's colors. I can't remember. If I'm misspeaking, I apologize, but I think he's cute. Super, super cute. Of course, he turns out perfectly. All right, so this is the new crystal flower one. This is the new version of it. So I haven't seen this one yet. I'm not 100% sure how it comes out because I've not done it. We do have those undercuts that are in there that we need to worry about. So I am kind of, after I loosen it up all the way around, I'm just taking it out petal by petal, very, very slowly, very carefully, so I don't rip anything because those petals are pretty thin, and it comes out like a dream. All right, let's see how this guy looks. Oh, it's so pretty. Like, so pretty. I love how you kind of get the blue from the chameleon powders down at the bottom, all sparkling and shining and crystal-like. And then you have the top where it's more clear, and you can see a little bit of that Rolio pearl white in there that's for that super sparkle. It's just, it's gorgeous. I love these molds. All right, please, God, let this have worked so that I can prove that to myself that I met myself with a challenge that I challenged myself with. Yeah. Okay. So, taking my time, which I wish I wouldn't, but I feel like it's important for you to see that you need to take your time on certain things like this. And then we're just going to start easing it and coaxing it out. Come on, hurry up. Need to know if I did it. And come on. Oh my goodness. Um. Oh my. Like, I'm really taking my time, in case you haven't realized that yet. Alright, here we come. And guess what? Guess what? No bubbles. None. Not one. And it's gorgeous. I really, 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 really love this. I think it's a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous mold. Um, yeah, that bit right there, I don't know what its issue was. It was kind of really soft and bendy still. It did, as it sat out for a couple days, it did end up curing hard. I don't know what its problem was, but we did it. You can do these with normal resin and it works. You just have to be willing to put the work in for it. All right, guys, that's a wrap on this one. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. I will catch you guys on Thursday for the next one. Love ya.